Hey guys, welcome back to the next video, and we are going to talk about Docker. Yes, of course. Um, but, but what this diagram implies is to make sure that you understand what exactly I'm trying to say to you. Well, to start with, as you can see on this picture from the left side, you see a house, which is basically a standalone server, which means you have an entire house for yourself. It may be a single floor or it may have double floor, it doesn't really matter, but then that's house for yourself. So that's basically a standalone server. Now, standalone server, on the other hand, we will see on the next video how actually it looks like in a presentation towards a standalone software. But then this standalone server means that the entire land is yours, which means that whatever happens with this property is your responsibility, and you may have to take care of that entirely. But when you compare it with virtualization, virtualization is like living in an apartment where you are sharing the land and that particular apartment is yours. Right, that's basically what I want to say as a virtualization. And containerization is like you are in a shared house where you will have one bedroom with maybe or without an attached toilet, with a shared accommodation. It's basically your amenities are shared, including sometimes including a bathroom, kitchen, and the common areas and stuff like that. So I would like to compare these three as for your understanding, this is what we are talking about. The entire training will be talking about just these three things, the three things of how you live is what we are talking about in terms of computer. How your data lives on your computer is basically on these three different methods. So let's just see the difference between virtualization and containerization in terms of this diagram. I'll try to explain it to you as easy as I can. First point I want to talk about is isolation. So when you think about an apartment, it's like you're living in a unit with its own entrance, amenities, electricity, water supply, and etc. If if one apartment has a plumbing problem, it doesn't affect the other apartments, right? So that's basically is the first option called isolation. And in terms of a shared house, each roommate is has a private bedroom, but shares a common area like kitchen, living room, and bathroom. If someone cooks a meal, other can smell it. But each person belonging in their own room remains private. So you are private, but then you understand, right? So you're shared. So you mean that you can actually listen to the sound which they make while walking around. So likewise, so that's basically comes with its own problem. In terms of resources, when you see it in the apartment, each apartment has its own kitchen, bathroom, living space, equivalent to an entire OS in a virtual machine. So so it's like equivalent to an entire operating system in a virtual machine. This might be effective if you want entire independent unit, but it is resource heavy because of the redundancy. In terms of shared accommodation or shared house, resourcing is a shared facility which reduces redundancy. In the tech world, containers share some OS kernel that consumes fewer resources than the virtual machine. On a whole, the resource consumption is much lesser in terms of a shared accommodation. Similar thing in a container as well. Let's talk about the overhead. First, we will compare that with the apartment building, and then we will go to shared houses. Overhead, just like how each apartment has its own set of facilities, each VM has its own operating system which requires more resources like CPU, memory, and storage. But in terms of the overhead, in terms of a shared accommodation, since the roommate shares the common area, there are less redundancy. Similarly, the containers are lightweight since they don't need separate operating system instance. Now let's talk about flexibility. Someone wants to change or move to a different apartment, it's bigger process. Similarly, migrating a virtual machine can be resource intensive and time consuming. In terms of flexibility on a shared accommodation, it's easier to change a room in a shared accommodation than to move from a apartment A to apartment B, because that's going to be a lot of things you need to move around. Similarly, containers can quickly started and stopped or even moved across. So, so all this being said, all you have to think about is what kind of application you are having. But these days, all application are designed in a way where it is easily movable across. So you need to host your application in a way that even the hosting service, like the container, can be easily moved rather than virtualization, because you have to have more resources, you need to have more overhead, it has less flexibility when you compare it with the containerization. So virtualization is how we used to do before, but then not anymore, because we have a simpler solution, a simpler way of processing this your items. Like containerization is the new virtualization, but then it is much faster, it is more flexible, it uses very less resources. So that's why organizations are moving towards containerizing your application rather than having it virtualized. Virtualization is even better than standalone server. If you think about moving a house from here to another house, that's even more lengthier process because it's a standalone server. So it all comes to your application, how your application is designed, how your application is configured. So most of the application these days are virtualized because it uses more resources. The applications are pretty much monolithic applications. They are not micro applications. They are not like divided into multiple pieces. Some applications are like very thick and heavy. So in those situations, you may have to stick around with virtualization as an option. But then when we move forward in our days where you are dividing the application workload into multiple different components, then I think you should go consider containerizing those applications and using resources much lesser than what actually it needs. Oh, sorry, what actually you think it needs. Okay, so testing anyways will prove that containerization is much faster when you work with virtualization. But then again, your application needs to support that. So your application needs to be rewritten, reconfigured in a way that it supports containerization. Right. That's all I have for you in this training. If you have any questions, please leave your questions on the question section. I'll see you on the next video.